All right, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the revamped Popcorn Politics. I'm your host, Dylan Brown. We're going to be doing things very differently than on the original Popcorn Politics for anybody who listened to that. Um, we, on that show, covered 1 hour of topical news and then did one movie review for the second hour. This one will just be 1 hour on three movies and their connection to politics in general, uh, foreign policy, whatever. Today, we're doing a 2022 retrospective looking at how society at large sort of felt about class. We'll be using three movies to talk about this: Triangle of Sadness, The Menu, and the sequel to Knives Out, Glass Onion. Joining me is my co host, Alex Heller. Alex, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. So I want to start with Triangle of Sadness.
Okay.
Alex, can you sort of lead us in with Triangle of Sadness?
Yeah. So Triangle of Sadness is the latest film by Ruben Östlund. I believe he is a Swedish or Norwegian director whose films that he basically talked about pretty much the same subject about class, how it affects us as a society. So his latest film called Triangle of Sadness is about models Carl and Yaya are invited for a luxury cruise with a rogues gallery of super rich passengers in the Caribbean. No, in the Mediterranean.
Mediterranean, yeah.
Yeah. At first, all appears Instagrammable. Everyone seems to be getting along, but the cruise ends catastrophically, and the group finds themselves marooned on a desert island for the foreseeable film. So that's just basically the basic synopsis of the film.
Yes, and for if this wasn't clear, we will be going full into spoilers for all three of these films. You have been warned. I highly recommend watching all three and then coming back if you haven't. So, what were your overall impressions of Triangle of Sadness, quality wise, and sort of how do you think it connects to s- how do you think it deals with class, and do you think that is actually reflective of anything?
I think the film is very entertaining. It's definitely a comedy. I think it's
Hmm.
the funniest one out of the three, but out of, in terms of talking about class or how it discusses our general feelings towards the rich and capitalist society as a whole. I think this one's the weakest one in
Hmm.
my opinion because really the meat of it happens for like the first, I want to say, 45, 50 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
And really it's basically a social experiment film. What would happen if all these influencers and super rich happen to be living on a desert island? Who would win, the super rich or the
Well,
average working Joe working on that cruise ship? And you see in the film, and they're in the latter half when they're stranded on that island, you see all the rich people and Instagram models struggling to actually live on that desert island, while I believe one of the crew members was an indigenous person that needed the money to work on that cruise, and she happens to get stuck on the same island as them, but she knows how to hunt for food, start a fire, actually, survive on a desert island, you know, and then all of the rich people suddenly just have to gather towards her and figure out, okay, she knows what to do, so I guess we're going to follow her, you know.
hmm
Um, so it's a role reversal in a sorts and showcases that in the way that, you know, it is a social experiment. And I feel like that's the weakest part of it because the
hmm
way that they're the way that they're criticizing at least the super rich on that cruise ship happens for the first half of the movie, and then you're very engaged by it, and the humor in it pretty much happens in the first half of the film as well. You know, you have Woody Harrelson being a quasi socialist slash communist, being
I don't know if there's anything quasi about it.
oh yeah, no, he's very overt about it. And you have another Russian individual, I think a Russian oligarch, arguing with him and getting into this debate on whether or not the super rich should be, not, you know, hold accountable, but maybe definitely punished. And they get into this belligerent, drunken escapade of, class, society, the philosophical argument, to the point where, you know, Woody Harrelson speaks to the super rich crew and passengers, saying like, okay, you all suck. This We deserve to not only sink, but also, you we're gonna we're gonna eat all the super rich. That's what we're gonna do. That's what we need to do and whatnot. And I thought that part was funny because of the way that he handled it. But by the time they're stuck on the island, I feel like that also becomes like they're like two movies in one,
They are.
you
And
know?
when I was watching it, I was actually quite jarred by the ship sinking and them ending up on the island. I I remember actually uh, saying to my friend, "This doesn't feel connected to what I was just watching."
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think the so calling this movie a movie about class might have been slightly misleading on my part.
I think it's a bit of a stretch, yeah.
I think the first half is definitely about class. The second half is more about power and
Mhm. Mhm.
and natural power structures in society, and how the class structure is actually quite unnatural. Um, because when you strip away everything that makes that puts the rich on top of society, they don't stay on top. It's not an innate thing. It's their status, and they're on the bottom of this island society. Yes, it's not the most original commentary. I think I think the first half knew exactly what it was, and I think that's why it worked. The
Mhm.
second half, I think, was trying to do a little bit more, and it
It bit
felt
off more than it could
undercooked.
chew.
It
Yeah.
felt undercooked.
Yeah, it bit off more than it could chew. I feel like I think they stretched out like the first half like as much as they possibly could, because I guess he needed to, fluff out the film as best as he can, just to say like, oh, okay, these guys are assholes, and by the time they get stuck on the island, you're going to see them suffer, and it's hilarious. And it is hilarious. It is
Mm,
hilarious. That role reversal toward with one of the crew members, just is just phenomenal. I love that part.
it's a good
But
turn.
yeah, it's a good turn. But I feel like other movies similar to it have done that aspect better and paced out a little bit more, you know,
N-
coherently.
Now, if I were to try to connect these two a little bit more, maybe it's my partiality towards the menu, but I think your bridge is Woody Harrelson.
Yes.
I think him dying in the crash was a mistake.
Yes, absolutely. He was probably the highlight of the film because I don't know why Osland decided to, build this character up. He was barely in the film for what, not even what, 30 minutes? Not
No, he wasn't.
25?
He
25. He was
he
referenced, you heard him, but he was barely in it for more than 30 minutes. And not only that, like, I think some of the trailers and the poster art made it a point saying, "Oh, he's the big star." It's like,
you
"Oh,
see,
yes,
what's
that's
funny? I didn't even know he was in the movie.
you didn't know he was in the movie?"
No, it was a complete shock when the door opened and Woody Harrelson came out. It's like, "Oh my
Oh,
god,
okay. Yeah.
he's in this."
Yeah. I feel like had he survived the crash, the sinking, I mean, had he survived that, I think the film would have been better off, because I think during the latter half, he would have sided with, the indigenous leader, the lower worker. But I think it would have been interesting to see if he did survive, he would probably side with the super rich, or at least say, "Hey, I'm the captain of the boat, ergo I have more power
Yeah,
and
you could you
and authority, and then
mhm.
I have a right to say who gets what, who does what, and so on and so forth."
Yeah, you could have highlighted the hypocrisy of some self-professed revolutionaries through Woody Harrelson being on the island. I just
Yeah,
think there was a stronger critique in here
yeah,
waiting to come out.
yeah. Like, especially what you said, like the hypocrisy that comes with neoliberals who want to actually, exact change but don't want to change anything. You know what I
Right.
mean? That I feel like that would have been exemplary for Woody Harrelson, because he is in a position of privilege. He is in a position of power, but had he survived the crash, had he survived the sinking of the boat, it would have been a very deconstructive critique on those types of individuals who want to change society but continue to hold some authority over, underprivileged countries, people,
The
society in
yeah,
general.
the people who wanna uplift the lower classes, but not lift them so high it's above their heads.
Exactly, yeah, or at least equal to them. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
And I think that would have been perfect for that. That would have been so perfect for that kind of critique right there, because I think the only film that eloquently described that sort of neoliberal criticism is Get Out. Get Out is probably the only one that really described it very best, because
mhm,
the parents are like, "Oh, we're super liberal. Like, I would have voted for Obama for like a third term if I had to," but they still treat, underprivileged minority societies and groups like they're beneath them. You know what I mean? They don't want to change
mhm.
that. And Knives Out, in a sense, the first one, I mean, also explains that perfectly, perfectly in that movie. They describe that,
Yeah.
but we're getting ahead of ourselves with that. But I feel like had Woody Harrelson been more into the film, and they would have deconstructed his character, I think this would have been a 5 out of 5 for me. In terms of discussing class in a post-pandemic uh, world. I think that film kind of it suited the time, in my opinion. But
I think all 3 suit the time
yeah,
in a very specific very specific, but also very different ways.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
I think Triangle of Sadness is very loose, and it's
y
up for interpretation.
yeah,
You
and
know?
that's not a bad thing. I thoroughly enjoyed the experience of watching it,
Yeah,
but I don't think it has as strong of a critique as the other 2 films we're gonna discuss.
yeah. I still
And,
think this is the funniest one out of all three of them, in my opinion.
I think I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, it's the funniest one. Um, Especially during the scene when the boat is rocking back and forth, and
Yes.
all the rich people are enjoying their, super like Iron Chef, Hell's Kitchen esque Gordon Ramsay type food, and like the little like serving foods that they like, all these like fancy restaurants serve, and they're like, oh,
Mhm,
they're enjoying it. But as the storm rages back and forth, everybody starts getting sick, everybody starts getting food poisoning as a result of it.
mhm.
It's I think that part of the film just, I think, had it ended right there, if it was a short film, had it ended right there, would have been perfect. I think like ending it right at the middle of all that craziness would have been perfect for that movie, in my opinion. But
No, I agree. I think the second half is too undercooked, and I think had it been a short film, a TV special, and it ended when the boat crashed, it would have been or when the boat sunk, it would have been almost perfect.
yeah, I also liked how they were kind of critiquing influencers. You know,
Mhm,
I always thought the idea of being an influencer is kind of redundant, ridiculous. Like, okay, So you're just like a model that works harder, if that's like the best way to describe it. You know, I think I think those are like at least the characters were the most unlikable characters in the film, in my opinion. And
Oh, Ni Nicholas Holt in, The Menu? Nah, he's the most unlikable of any of them.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I was
Yeah.
talking more about Triangle of Sadness.
Oh, I thought you meant, like, of the 3 we're gonna
Of the three,
discuss.
no, 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 no. No, I in the
Nah,
movie in Triangle of Sadness, the what's it called? The
the
influencers
influencers.
were the most unlikable ones because I always thought that kind of job is kind of ridiculous in its own way. You know, like you're getting paid to be pretty. Cool, good for you. You're making
Well, that's a
six.
job that's always existed and
Yeah, that's
will
always
always
existed.
exist.
Like even before social media. Like that, it was always around.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I feel
models,
like, yeah, but I feel
magazine
like,
models.
hmm exactly. But I feel like it turned up to like 11 because not only do I think it's easier on models in general, male and female models in general, that if they now they have a means to control their own income rather than going through a middleman when they're going through like a modeling agency or
Mhm,
a newspaper or like a magazine to sponsor them. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So
No,
I
I
think
I get you.
it gives more freedom in terms of these individuals trying to like you know make money off of their likeness, and more power to them. But
Yeah.
I always thought, when when like these influencers do a photo op about super serious topics, I always thought that was kind of stupid. Like I there was this I always thought that, like, when like these influencers just pose all pretty or pose all handsome or like very serious, and then they say you know, hashtag save Ukraine or hashtag eat the rich or and whatnot. Like, okay,
Uh, uh,
why are you dressing all handsome and fancy and pretty
well,
for that one particular, and what does
and
the
I could
photo have to do with any of what you're trying to say or give a point to? You
and I
know,
could be wrong, but didn't the beginning of the movie literally have one of the influencers post one of those messages
I
with
think so. Yeah, I don't think it was about Ukraine. I think it was more about like um
I thought
I
it was
think.
a climate change thing.
Yes, it was climate change. Yes, it was. Yes, that's what it was. I was like, "What? What? Really? Okay." And it just, trickles down as a result from real life. Like, okay, cool. Why are you talking about that? That makes no sense. It's just arbitrary and random.
Yeah.
Okay, good for you. I'm glad you're aware. I'm glad you're self-aware of where you live in life, but you're doing nothing about it. You're still flying in a jet that takes more gas than certain low-income countries. You know,
Well, they
you
they also critique that in the movie.
oh, that was yeah. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. Like I only saw it twice. I saw it once in theaters and once on my phone.
I did not get to see it in theaters. That and not getting to see Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio are always gonna be 2 of my big regrets this year.
Yeah, I saw the movie in theaters. The first time I saw it in theaters, and it was just me and just one other guy on the way back, and me and him were just enjoying it. We were just like laughing our asses off the entire time of the film, and it just goes back to like how movie theaters are dying in general, but that moment in time was just so perfect, and
Yeah.
especially the middle part of the film where all the rich people are getting sick and throwing up and shitting themselves. That was just I was that was a long that was the first time in a long time that I actually cried in a movie theater laughing. That was just perfect. And then I
It
saw it on my phone a couple weeks later. I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can find this on the internet. I want to watch it again. And then I saw it, and it was just as good. A big 4 out of 5 in my opinion. But
yeah.
but going back to your point with class in general, I think that's the weakest one.
Yeah,
It deals more in power than with class, like you said.
yeah, especially the second half. But I think we've talked about everything we really can with Triangle of Sadness. Let's move to the menu,
Ah,
which I
okay.
know is your favorite of the three.
Yes, that
Um,
one's the best one in my opinion.
so the menu stars Ray Fiennes, Anya Taylor-Joy, Nicholas Hoult, and John Leguizamo. Um, Ray Fiennes plays this enigmatic, eccentric chef who invites all of these people of privilege to his island restaurant for a special meal. Um, and basically, if you've seen i- if you've seen Hereditary, if you've seen any murder mystery, you kind of know what you're getting into. The chef invites all of these horrible people to the island, um, exposes all of the horrible things they've done, and is basically has taken it upon himself to punish them.
Mm,
Except Anya Taylor Joy. She was brought there the chef's um, without the chef's knowledge as as a last minute substitute guest for Nicholas Holt, and so that his conversations with her lead a lot into the class critiques we're going to get into. What were your overall thoughts on the menu?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was like a mix between what you said, Hereditary and Chef.
I
Um,
I actually called it a mix between Hereditary and Ratatouille
no,
for the
I
ending.
yeah, oh yeah, the ending, yeah, absolutely. But I think it's a mix between Hereditary slash Midsummer and Chef, John Favreau's Chef, because it deals with like the same aspect of like cooking is more than just eating food and making it. It's like an art form. But yeah, I absolutely love this film. I think this was probably the best one that really critiques class in general, and the super rich. I think this is a film that just really just like honed it on and really, it was probably the tightest one story wise, in my opinion.
I
Um,
agree.
it was generally focused, and it's another movie where the super rich are stranded on another island and on a secluded island, and they're tortured to death and whatnot. And it's weird how all these movies are pretty much the same movie, but different at the same time. But
Yeah.
the menu is probably the best one that focuses on that critique, and it doesn't necessarily just critique, um, you know, the super rich and how they treat
No.
working class individuals. It I think this film spoke to a lot of people who worked during COVID, who despite losing everything because of the pandemic, were forced to work regardless of what was happening outside, especially in restaurants. My God, you know this is the film where restaurant workers can just sit back and say thank you, thank you, thank you. This is exactly what I would say. This is exactly what I would do. And telling these idiots, the servers are probably, especially now, it's not just like at COVID anymore. It's like in a post COVID era, you know servers and restaurant workers are still getting treated like shit. They're still getting beaten up for some reason. They're still, have to deal with these entitled Karens, these entitled Kens back and forth. Like, I feel like this is a movie that really spoke to a bigger audience in general that not only work during COVID, but continue to work in this post COVID era where people feel like a little bit more entitled than they should have been. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I spent a year inside, so I deserve this, and and you should be working the way I should be, the way I want to be treated, the way I wanted to. It's like, no, bro, okay, we suffered just the same as you, but we probably suffered more and still made bank as a result. You know, this film really just spoke to, especially like a couple of my friends were working during COVID and lost their job during COVID. And COVID's even mentioned in this film. It's even
Hmm.
mentioned in this film. Like the Ray Fiennes kills his owner regardless of whether or not he kept him open during COVID. And he was like, I think Ray Fiennes was like, doesn't matter. He still had to work because of an individual forcing him to. Now it's not explicitly described as to whether or not he was forced to work during COVID, but you can infer or at least see whether or not, or at least understand that he may have been forced to work during COVID. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like it's hinted. I think he was forced during COVID, and you know that's when it flipped to him. Like he already knew that he wanted to like kill himself and just and make everybody just like suffer as a result. But I think this is just my interpretation. I think COVID pretty much forced Ray Fiennes' character to say, "Oh, it's not changing anytime soon, so I might as well just say screw these guys, I'm going home." You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
So,
absolutely.
but yeah, and this was another movie that was also accidentally funny.
I don't think it was accidental.
You
Um,
think that was on purpose?
the writer behind the guy who directed this movie is a writer and director on Game of Thrones and Succession.
Mm,
Um, and if you've watched Succession, this is the same tone.
okay.
Succession is very funny and a very sort of mean-spirited critique of its characters. It has a level of disdain for all of its characters, and you feel that bleed through in this movie too.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Even Slovak, even Ray Fiennes, there is a level of disdain for him,
yeah.
as there obviously should be.
Well, yeah, yeah. But I feel like it's weird because this is the first, Ray Fiennes movie where he's the villain, but I'm actually rooting for him. You know, he's been like typecasted as a villain in general for quite a long time. For probably most of his career. But
Hmm.
this is the first time where, like, as a villain, I'm actually rooting for him because, like, I can understand why he feels like he's not happy with his art form anymore. He feels burnt out, and funny enough, this is a film about being burnt out with your, profession, with your passion. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's a subtle, it's subtle, but I do think this film is also about being burnt out in general. You know, and like what his helpers, they kind of feel burnt out too, but they love they love Ray Fiennes' character to the point where they're willing to do anything for him. It's like a cult. That's what it is. It's a cult.
Yeah, it is a cult.
But
Any group of people who are so devoted to you that they'll die for you is a cult.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do think it's a film about being burnt out, artistic burnt out.
I think it's a critique of obsession as well.
Yeah, a little
Um,
bit.
I think it definitely is. It's there's a level of no, not even a level of. There's just arrogance and narcissism permeating throughout all of the characters, but especially Ray Fiennes is Slovak.
And
Um,
Nicholas Holt.
oh God, yeah.
Yeah, Nicholas
Um,
Holt. It's weird. I kind of related to him a little bit, and because I was like, you know how passionate I am on certain movies and certain topics. Like,
mhm,
of course I would be acting like that if, like, say, Martin Scorsese was going to be making me a movie in front of my eyes, or at least or if I traveled back in time and met Akira Kurosawa, of course I'd be acting just like that. But it's weird because, like you said, it's also about obsession, but I also think it's a critique on those who, obsess about certain aspects of, you know, certain art forms, and especially like what's his name? Yeah, Nicholas Holt's character. I kind of related to him in that aspect because he was just like really into the whole experience and you were like, picking, he was picking like certain things out, here and there, but you know that wasn't what's his name, that wasn't Ray Fiennes' character's intention. His intention was to like, oh yeah, you're gonna die tonight, you're gonna die, and I'm gonna enjoy seeing you suffer. Whereas Nicholas Holt's character is like, huh, that's interesting, he doesn't mean it, but like he's just like on a whole nother level of artistic expression and whatnot. And Ray Fiennes is like, no, you're going to die, I'm going to die, we're all going to die tonight, and I'm going to enjoy it. And
Yeah, there
it just
was. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and it just like, and it just explains like it, and critiques, in my opinion, you know, fan base obsession, or reading too much into a certain topic.
It's a critique of devotion.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I it's funny too, because now I am, being Nicholas Holt's character right now, because we're picking too much into the film itself. Whereas it's just like, oh, it's just a bunch of rich people getting tortured and getting killed, but there's layers, like an onion, there's layers into it. But I like that part of the film too, because it was just saying, you guys are like, people who obsess way, or at least obsess way too much on a certain thing, should definitely be,
Hmm.
not killed, but at least criticized to the point where they're just ostracized in that community. You know what I mean? I
Yeah, I
That's, I
mean,
think, my one of my favorite parts of the movie.
yeah, there were a lot of just to bring it back to the class critique. The whole idea that you don't get bread at the
Oh yeah.
because
Hmm.
bread is the food of the working class.
Hmm.
Um, it, and he brings out all of these like bread sauces, things that you spread onto your bread without any bread.
Yeah.
Um, I It wasn't particularly subtle, but I
Mm.
also don't mind because I don't think he was trying to be subtle.
No.
Um, this wasn't about subtle messages. This was putting all of the bad things you've done in your face
Yeah.
and making you repent.
Hmm.
Um, and obviously, if you go to his conversations with Anya Taylor-Joy's character, um, he has that line about, "We're all gonna die tonight, but do you want to die with those who give or those who take?"
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, he he clearly sees the divide, and in in to be a little scattershot with it. If you go forward in the film a bit, when Slovik is talking to the older man who got his finger chopped off, um, and he's asking about any dish that he ate last time he was there. Immediately after that, Slovik, Ray Fiennes goes into this monologue about how um, he's reached a point where only the people who can't appreciate his work can afford his work. Um,
Yeah. Hmm.
and I think there's something there about how when you reach a certain level, when you have so much, no matter how impressive something is, you can't appreciate it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think the criticism of Nicholas Holt's character is actually the opposite.
Mm.
Um, that Nicholas Holt's character cared so much and appreciated it so much that he was losing the point. He was
Yeah.
missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I see, that's why I like Nicholas Holt's character a lot, because a lot of people can relate to that. At least not to the point where, like, oh, I have all this money, I'm gonna start, being obsessed with a certain topic. It just really, in general, is people who like obsess with certain, you know issues, or at least certain passions, that they lose sight of it all.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole idea that they can't appreciate what they are eating because they just have so much. I
Yeah.
think I think that hits at a very real perception, and I
Hmm.
don't know if it's true because frankly I'm not that rich. So
Yep.
I don't know if it's true,
Hmm.
but it is a very real perception that people have of the ultra wealthy that there is just a disconnect
Yeah.
after a
Hmm.
certain point. And it's
Yeah.
no keenly felt by a cook who knows when his cooking is going unappreciated.
Yeah. And losing artistic expression in general. Like again, I think that just comes back to the idea of like I do think it's a film about being burnt out in a society that continues to, you know, pay for all these living expenses and pay for all these lavish stuff. Like even you know super rich artists are probably just as burnt out as Ray Fiennes' character. They
Well, Ray
probably feel.
Fiennes is a super rich artist.
Yeah, he is a super rich artist, yes, and he feels and his art is being unappreciated, you know.
Hmm.
And I feel like he's just like I'm making all this money, but I don't feel happy. I feel like that's just another critique in general. Like, oh, money won't buy you happiness, but
Well,
when people say that, I'm just like, well, money won't buy me happiness, but
but it'll buy me dinner.
it'll buy me dinner. It's sure as shit not going to make me sad. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's why the ending. I know people have mixed feelings on the ending. I very much appreciated the ending for a lot of reasons,
hmm
but the idea that the the only time Slovak was happy was when he was cooking in the equivalent of a McDonald's
yeah,
because he knew his work was being appreciated. Um, It does go to that idea, that you were talking about. It I I don't agree with money can't buy you happiness. I think it certainly can to an extent,
hmm
but I do agree that there is almost no substitute for knowing your labor is valued,
yeah,
um, e especially when you love what you're doing. You love that gratification of knowing other people see you,
hmm
and I can't imagine how maddening it would be if um if I had all of that money and the only people who could afford what I was creating were people who were just completely unable to appreciate it.
yeah.
I don't know how I don't know how I would deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like it's weird because the only two characters that started from the bottom to the top are what's it called? Anya Taylor Joyce's character and Ray Fiennes' character, and they immediately click. Like Ray Fiennes himself just he's the one that, is able to, you know, pick them out. Pick the
Yeah,
one person that's like, "Oh, you struggled for your entire life. I know
I
where you stand on certain issues."
I loved that moment where she walked in and he said, "You think I wouldn't recognize a fellow service industry worker when I
Ah,
see
yeah,
one?"
I love that part. And it's so funny. Like that was probably supposed to be meant so serious, but I chuckled the entire time that part. Another favorite part of mine was when John Leguizamo's assistant or secretary,
Oh, the student loans.
yeah, where he was like, where Ray Fiennes was like, um,
Did
where
you
where did you go to school? And she was like Brown, and he was like, and Ray Fiennes was like
student
student
loans?
loans, and she was like no, and then he said, I'm sorry, but you're dying tonight. I was like, oh my god, what is this? Is I feel like this is a movie that was just so unintentionally funny.
Well, and, sorry to cut you off. I think there's actually a point there
Yeah.
to that very funny moment. And I don't know that the director intended to make this point. I would actually be surprised if they did, but this
Mm,
is what I took away. There was an arbitrariness to that. He
mm,
didn't know Slovak had no idea if she got with Brown and got a full ride on her academics. He
mhm,
didn't know that. He assumed that
mhm,
because she didn't have student debt, she had an unearned privilege
mm,
and that she deserved death, same as the critic who closed down restaurants arbitrarily I mean, he essentially could have become exactly what he was trying to destroy, and he
Mm,
says as much. He says he's become just as bad as the rest of them.
yeah.
But I think that arbitrariness, I think that says something about how there's sometimes a lack of nuance
Mm.
in the overall class critique that people will make. There's sometimes a lack of specificity. Um,
So what you're trying to say is the girl didn't deserve to die?
I'm not. I'm saying she may not have, and he didn't investigate further. He
Mm,
made an assumption that may not have been well founded.
mm.
Um,
I think, well, I'm just looking at his character's point of view, Ray Fiennes' character point of view, that, she's already in a point of privilege in general. Not only does she have no student loans to pay for, she went to an Ivy League school with that's like what, $100,000 a year at
sure.
at least, you know.
Mhm.
I'm making an assumption. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you know what it's Brown University. Like
Sure.
that's a
We
full
actually
ride to.
did. We actually did. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you
That's
off
fine.
again. I watched it for a second time,
Mhm.
I think last week, and when that scene came up, my friends and I actually looked up the tuition at Brown, and I think it was like 75,000 a year.
So okay, but that's
But
still a
a lot,
lot.
a
Yeah,
lot.
plus
But
interest. You know.
but I think the point I was getting at was, yes, that's a lot of money. Yes, she may have gotten in and gotten out with no tuition because of legacy admissions or because of favoritism. But she also could have gotten there because she was the smartest person in the room and got there on her own merit.
Okay. Hmm.
And the idea that Slovak didn't investigate that further, I think it shows that sometimes people making a broader class critique sweep br- uh, there's an expression, sweep with too broad a brush. I
Hmm.
think that's the right expression.
Hmm.
And they don't investigate further when further investigation may reveal something that changes your perception.
Yeah. I can see that point. I can definitely see that point, but I think she's already in a point of privilege immediately because since she's graduated Brown with no student loans, she's already on the upper echelon of
Oh,
society.
certainly upper echelon. I won't argue with that.
You know, like sure, like I think even if you have like an Ivy League degree, you'll always be close to like say the top 20% of top earners. You know what I mean? You'll always be up in the top, but you still have to like worry about tuition and loans and stuff like that. But with
Hmm.
no loans, not having to stress over loans with an Ivy League degree, like dude, I mean whatever problems you have, I could care less, man. Like you have nothing to worry about, whereas everybody else has to worry about it. You know what I mean? And I feel like
Hmm.
that's like where the whole humor comes from, is like that little twist on that.
Oh, definitely. And
Yeah.
I think it was a great movie. I do want to move to the movie that was going to take up the full hour, Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery. Um, when we were initially planning this episode, there was a lot of media discussion about it because people were grossly misunderstanding the idea of a mystery,
Mm,
um, and ascribing certain problems to the movie that are just byproducts of a mystery. But for anyone who hasn't watched it yet, um, Glass Onion is the sequel to 2019's Knives Out. Stars Daniel Craig, Edward Norton, Janelle Monáe, Catherine Hahn, Kate Hudson. Um, and essentially, the plot is Edward Norton's character plays a billionaire, maybe probably based on Elon Musk, um, who invites all of his friends to a remote island. Are you sensing a theme? Um, to for a party and to solve the mystery of his murder. He's putting on a murder mystery event. And the movie takes a lot of twists, and ultimately, I think, devolves into a fairly straightforward, but I still think really interesting critique of intellectualism and, again, the ultra wealthy. Um, Going back to you again, Alex, thoughts on Knives Out, Glass Onion?
This is my least favorite out of all three of them.
See, it's
Um,
my favorite of the three, which is
yeah,
interesting.
this one's my least favorite one. Because I like the twists. I liked the whole, craziness of it. I think the first one did it better.
Um,
I think the first one did it better in terms of its writing, its theme,
I,
and its overall pacing, in my
ask
opinion.
ask me again tomorrow, and I might agree with you.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't, but after my first viewing, I did.
Mhm.
Uh, I think they're very close in my mind. I think they're both spectacular.
I think the
Um,
first one is like an instant classic. I think this one is it's good. It's not as good. Like I'm not saying it's a bad
mhm.
movie. I think this is my least If we're gonna compare apples and oranges, if we're gonna compare these two. I think I'd much rather watch the first one than the second one.
Yeah.
I
So, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So, putting aside all of the twists and turns, because most of them aren't relevant to the discussion we're going to have, um, I the there are sort of 3 points I want to focus on. The first one is Miles himself, Edward
Mm,
Norton's character,
hmm
um, Helen slash Andy, um, Janelle Monáe.
Oh, Janelle Monáe. Okay, thank you.
um, and sort of just the idea of disruption,
Hmm
um, because it comes up in the beginning, and I think it very clearly comes up at the end. So, starting with Miles, there has been a lot of debate about who Miles is based on. Um, Ryan Johnson, the director, says it was not based on Elon Musk. Um, I don't agree with that. I disagree with the writer of the movie on his own character. Um, this was 2022 Elon, if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, I think this was
Um,
a happy accident.
no, this truly was art, life imitating art.
Hmm
This
hmm
movie was shot, filmed, edited in the can, and then Elon bought Twitter and made all of the things that Daniel Craig had to say about Miles Braun come
hmm
true.
hmm Yep, that was. I think Edward Norton should have gotten at least an award nomination for that character in general, because he is Elon Musk. Now, like you said, pre 2022, Elon may have been a little bit more,
Under the
say,
radar.
under the radar, or at least his
Well,
antics were always ridiculous, you know.
and let me
But
say, there are other characters that other people that Miles is based on.
yeah.
Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of Theranos,
Oh
clearly an
yeah.
inspiration.
hmm
Steve Jobs,
Oh my
clearly
God.
clearly an inspiration for
Yep.
Miles.
hmm
But
The unholy trinity.
yes, but Miles Braun runs a social media empire. He has a car company. He has a space exploration business.
hmm
Need we make more
Yeah.
comparisons to
And
Elon?
he's in the energy business too, the
And
same way
he's in the
Elon.
energy business.
Yeah.
And he makes up words
Yes, he does. Yep. He makes
and
up
just
words.
has a general misunderstanding for basic things.
Yep. Created the first NFT, but didn't get credit for it. Forgot about that part. And that was like literally at the beginning of the movie. He faxes his assistant, or at least his head of R&D, all of his ideas. And he was like, "Oh, what about an NFT, a non-refundable token?" And
I did not notice that.
yeah, that was at the beginning of the movie.
I
Yeah,
completely missed that.
yeah, and it was framed. It was framed because they didn't actually, you know.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that was really funny. I like
So
that.
is there an element of Sam Bankman-Fried in here too?
Who?
Sam Bankman-Fried, the head of FTX?
Um, a little bit, probably. Yeah, like
I
I
feel
think.
like there's a hint of him in here. Miles is just very ubiquitous for these sort of aloof, ultra wealthy who wants to be liked.
Yeah, or yeah, he's Mark Zuckerberg too. Yep.
He is.
Yeah, yeah.
So go ahead.
He's like an amalgamation. Like he is like a big, you know, collection of every single tech billionaire that we've come to at least hate or despise or loathe or make fun of. And I feel like that is probably the best example of a, you know, tech billionaire gone haywire or gone crazy. And that to
Yeah.
me is just like so perfect. That
And
that that's what I love about this movie too.
the entire critique of intellectualism comes in through Miles. Um, the for the whole film, Daniel Craig's Benoit Blanc is trying to solve this mystery because there has to be an intelligent reason why all this is happening. There has to be a game. But much like American politics for the last 6 years, there is no game. It's just a bunch of dumb people.
Mm,
Um, there's a tendency in politics, in society in general, from journalists, from pundits, to overanalyze what somebody is doing or why somebody is doing something. And that's not unique. I think we're doing it.
yeah,
But
definitely.
this tendency is ubiquitous, and the movie is not even subtly telling you that that's wrong. Um, not Occam's razor, but the Hamlin's razor. I can't remember which term it is. Um, the dumbest answer is most often the correct answer,
Yeah,
or never ascribe to malice what can equally be ascribed to stupidity.
yeah.
That's it.
That is the synopsis of this movie.
Yes.
That is the
Um,
synopsis of this movie.
yeah. Well, no, because it was malice. It was just stupid malice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. What do you think?
I think you hit it on the head. I think that is exactly what this movie is about. It's about a bunch of smart people doing stupid shit, you know,
Not even smart
overanalyzing.
people.
What? Yeah, no, not even smart people. People who claim to be intellectuals, these pseudo intellectuals, you know, and whatnot, who just think that, oh, I have to be the smartest person in the world, or at least the smartest person in the room, the most interesting person in the room. Especially how Miles like just loved or was obsessing over the Mona Lisa, and trying to break down all its like certain subtle aspects of it, and the way that he treated it too. It was just like, okay, he's a child. He is a literal child, a man child in general.
Yeah, who never has any original ideas. Every
Yeah,
idea in this movie he stole from somebody else.
exactly.
His second murder plot was stolen from Benoit Blanc. Um, even burning the note, even burning the napkin that Janelle Monáe showed him, Leslie Odom Jr.'s character had just asked him why he didn't burn the napkin.
But isn't that just like, American pop culture in general nowadays, at least for the past 10 to 15 years? Because
Um,
we've been borrowing and, reusing and stealing ideas back and forth for the past,
well,
10,
liter
15 years.
so broader discussion to be had here, but I tend to err on the side of literature is imitation. Um, you steal ideas, you put twists on ideas, that you take something that somebody else has done and you adapt it in your own way. There's no really truly original idea. You've seen everything somewhere. Every film, every book is a patchwork of great ideas told in a unique way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that's like what's been happening for the past, 10, 15 years or so. Most movies have been either reboots or sequels, or like different angles of the same story. And I feel like that whole aspect towards like the latter half, where Miles is shown to be like stealing everything and redoing and reusing and making things his own way, um, is pretty, exemplary of American pop culture in general.
I actually
Um,
did read a very interesting piece or thread. I can't remember if it was on Reddit or an actual article about how Glass Onion wasn't actually a critique of billionaires, it was a critique of Netflix.
mm,
Um, and I can't, we don't have enough time to get all the way into it. I will link the piece or the thread down below later when I find it.
okay,
It was a very interesting read.
okay,
And but I think I don't I think there's merit in reboots. I do. I think there's a lot of artistic merit in reboots. I think some of the best movies of all time have been reboots. But I also think there's a difference between rebooting something and completely stealing an idea, Miles didn't take Benoit's murder plot and adapt it.
he
Benoit's
just
murder plot was
yeah,
grab a loaded gun and turn off the lights.
yep,
And
yep,
Miles grabbed a loaded gun and turned off the lights.
yeah, yeah,
There was no patchwork.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
Um, but going onward a bit, because we are running low on time, um, two final points I wanted to make. Janelle Monae's character and the idea of disruption. Janelle Monae's characters, Andy and Helen, um, really exemplify, I think, the class critique in the movie, um, specifically through Miles's speech about disruption,
mm, mhm,
um, and her rebuke of that there's no disruption going on here. That Dave Bautista, Catherine Hahn, Kate Hudson, they're holding on for dear life to Miles because he's their meal ticket, and they'll
yeah,
do anything to protect him.
mhm,
Um, this is going to get me a lot of angry replies on Twitter, but this is a lot like the people who reply to Elon with with ideas for how to change Twitter, thinking he's going to use them and give
yeah,
them credit, and
yeah,
it, it's a critique of that idea that Miles doesn't care about any of them. I think
no,
that's exemplified. He kills Dave Bautista, but beyond that, he has this talk with uh, Blanc about how he misses Andy because with everyone else, it's just agendas. He sees through them. It's a lot
mhm,
like Ray Fiennes seeing through his customers.
yeah,
Miles sees through his friends. He knows they're lying. He knows that they're just using him,
yeah,
but he's so desperate to be liked that he's okay with it.
yeah. He's a very sad man, very sad man.
Yeah.
Um,
And the whole idea of disruption is actually borne out later in the film at the end with the Mona
mm,
Lisa. Um,
yeah, yeah, mhm,
the uh, uh, Helen smashing all of those glass sculptures, just like Miles said. When you break something small that everyone will agree with, when she's breaking glass sculptures, all of Miles's friends are on board. They're all helping her out. When she starts breaking the piano, the bar, sets fire to the place, she gradually loses people. And then she blows up the glass onion
mhm,
and goes to burn down the Mona Lisa, and everyone's trying to stop her because the Mona Lisa is the system that Miles described in his talk about disruption.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody wants you to destroy the Mona Lisa. We saw that
Yeah.
it play out in real life when climate change activists threw oil
Paint. Yeah, exactly.
on
And
a
not just on the
painting.
Mona Lisa, it's just like on paintings and in general. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. That's weird. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and even tangentially left wing people were like, "Oh, we agree with your message, but don't devalue art like that."
Mm.
There's a limit to everyone's
Mhm.
tolerance for disruption.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's weird how you explain that because, you know, you said that the Mona Lisa represents the system and how everybody's trying to hold on to the system regardless of what it is. And, the way that you compared it to like the climate change activists who are throwing paint, oil, and stuff at like paintings in general in this day and age, like these even I'm just like, oh, why are you doing that? That makes no sense. But the same system that holds these paintings in the museum is the same system that's causing or at least not doing anything in terms of combating climate change.
And
So
it
that's a
showed, yeah. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So it's just like, and it just goes. I think Ryan Johnson didn't do that intentionally, but
He didn't because that story came out after the movie was filmed.
yeah, exactly. So
Again, life imitating art.
yeah, so it's weird. I didn't notice that. That's okay. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there, yeah, there's just a limit to the amount of disruption that even revolutionaries will tolerate.
Yeah.
They don't want to destroy like in the conversation that Andy and Miles were having, where Andy was like, "This could blow up the world," and
Yeah.
Miles was like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
He misunderstood what she meant, but Miles was okay with blowing up the world. And that's the difference between the people at the very, very top and the people on the very, very bottom. The
Yeah.
people on the very, very top, they're kind of okay. They're okay with as much disruption as it takes to keep their place in the system intact
Yeah. Unless it
because
hurts their bottom dollar. Yeah.
they have more to lose, but also less to lose because they have a certain amount of safety.
Yeah.
They're a little bit removed. The people on the bottom, the people who are holding on for dear life, can't afford to break the system.
Yeah. And it goes back to Ryan Johnson's first film, where you have these group of individuals.
Which film?
The first film, the first
Oh, I thought
Knives
you
Out.
said Ryan Johnson's first film.
No,
Which
Ryan
one was
Johnson's.
that?
Yeah, Ryan Johnson's first Knives
Knives
Out
Out.
film, where you have I think there's this one character. She was in college, and the mom was trying to like use the granddad's money as a means to like keep paying her for college. And the young girl was like, "Oh, well, we should help out, Anya de Armas's character as best as we can." But all in all, she's like, no, I want to keep I want to keep my place where I want to keep going to school. I still want that money, blah 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 blah. So it just goes back to like that whole idea of these individuals who want to change the world but don't want to go, they don't want to help these individuals as much as they can. They want to keep they want to keep it. They want to say like, oh, we're there for change, but don't want to like change anything, unless it just doesn't affect them. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's I think Knives Out, or at least the second one, continues what Ryan Johnson was trying to say in his first film. But I
Yeah.
feel like he's a lot more angry in this one than
I
he is.
think he is. And that was the final point I wanted to make.
Yeah,
All three of these movies, Triangle of Sadness least of all, but Knives Out most of all, reflect a very angry view of the ultra rich.
yeah,
Knives Out, the first one, was laughing with the upper class. This one is laughing at them and telling them they're terrible people,
yeah.
which is why I think this one was slightly more divisive.
Yeah, a little. I could see that. Yeah, I personally think, in my opinion, it was just it's not as good writing wise. I
Well,
think the first
that's
one's
also
better.
I'm sure there is a lot of people who just think the first one is better,
Yeah,
but I think there is also a bit of like you've seen it online. You've seen the people
yeah,
calling this a super woke movie, that it terrible writing, yeah, purely political. The people who are making those critiques are ironically proving Ryan Johnson's point
yeah.
about nobody wants to break the system itself. All
Hmm.
of these people who are getting mad at the second movie but liked the first one
Exactly.
clearly didn't take the message from the first one.
Yeah.
Or if they did take the message from the first one, they thought that they were excluded from that. And because of the, I think, more overt allusions to real people in this one,
Hmm.
like I think Dave Bautista is clearly a combination of Alex Jones and Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Hmm. Exactly.
Um, Kate Hudson, I didn't. I was racking my brain trying to figure out who Kate Hudson was based on. I think she was based on Kanye, honestly.
No, no, Roseanne. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I could see that.
Roseanne. Yeah, she was mostly based off of Roseanne because they explicitly said that she said some like super racist or messed up thing
Oh, she compared
while she
herself to
was
Harriet Tubman. She
yeah,
did blackface.
and she did yeah she did that and what's it called? She said something racist on Twitter and then blamed it on Ambien or a sleeping pill.
Well, she used the word Jewy, I think,
Yes,
which
yes,
is why I made the Kanye link
yeah, yeah.
because
She
of all
yeah
Kanye's stuff,
yeah, no Lord. I think she's
or
more
honestly,
close.
Trump.
Yeah, well, she's more close to Kanye and Roseanne than Trump, but that's neither here nor there. But what's it called? Yeah, she's more close to Roseanne and Catherine Heigl,
Han.
Catherine Hahn. Yeah, Catherine Hahn's character was kind of interesting too,
They
because
didn't give her much to do. Her or Leslie Odom Jr.
yeah, they were like there, you
Yeah,
know.
they were there. I liked them. They were
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Um, Poor Jessica Henwick literally never gets anything to do in anything.
Oh, who's that?
She played Kate Hudson's assistant.
Oh yeah, that's right. Wasn't she in The Whale?
No,
No, that's
I,
somebody
all-
else.
I don't think no. That was the girl from that was the woman from the menu.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Jessica Henwick is in The Fourth Matrix. She's in the Iron Fist show.
Yeah.
She's in Last Jedi
Oh
as
yeah, she is.
yeah. She never gets anything to do, and it's sad because she's
Yeah.
great in this.
Yeah, she's really good. Yeah, and especially Kate Hudson's character where she's trying to speak to Miles like, dude, if you ruin this woman's life, you're ruining my life at the same time because I have to deal with her on a 24/7 basis, you know.
Yeah.
And I was
So
like, yeah.
so that's basically the final point I wanted to make is this is a very angry movie.
Yeah.
And I think it is definitely reflective of 2022. I think society has become a lot angrier since the first Knives Out. And I think that's undeniable.
Yeah, since COVID. Yeah, since
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
COVID, the 2020 election, COVID, people are just angrier.
Yeah.
And all three of these movies are a reflection of that. And
Mhm.
they're angrier at the powerful, at the people who kept them down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that's gonna be all for this week. We'll be back next week, probably same time, to discuss three other movies. We will tweet out beforehand what those three will be so that you have plenty of time to watch ahead. Thank you for listening to this episode of Popcorn Politics. Alex, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
For people on the podcast, where can they find you online?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at AFXHeller. I'm always there, so you can always find me on there.
And you can find me on Twitter at Dylan W. Brown 1. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.